Most aspirants treat optional as a subject. Toppers treat it as an opportunity. An opportunity to gain an edge, boost their main score and strengthen their final rank. The question is simple: simultaneous preparation today or overwhelming pressure later on? Because optional preparation cannot be built overnight after prelims. It requires time, depth, practice, refinement. Start early, prepare smart, stay ahead. Join the VisionIAS Optional Classroom Program 2027 and turn your optional into your strongest scoring advantage. With comprehensive syllabus coverage, expert faculty guidance, subject-specific answer writing support, personalized mentorship, regular tests and performance assessment. Starting 1st July, batches are available for Anthropology, Geography, History, Philosophy, Physics, PSIR, Public Administration, Sociology. Register now and secure your seat. Your preparation may look complete, but UPSC Prelims 2026 showed something important. Completion is not the same as readiness. The paper did not just test whether aspirant had read a topic, it tested whether they could think through it. Could they eliminate smartly? Could they connect static concepts with current issues? Could they stay calm when the question was not direct? Could they take decisions under pressure? That is where many aspirants struggle, not because they did not study, but because their preparation stayed in input mode, reading more, collecting more, revising passively. UPSC needs more than that. It needs a preparation system that turns knowledge into judgment. That is what the VisionIAS Delhi GS Foundation course is built for. Concepts are taught in a connected sequence. Current affairs is linked with static subjects. Tests help you identify gaps before the exam does. Answer writing builds structured thinking for mains. Mentorship helps correct your direction early. Build readiness from the beginning. VisionIAS Delhi GS Foundation course.
Hello everyone, a very good evening to all of you. I welcome you all to this session on anthropology. The orientation for this batch, which is going to start on 15th of July. So we are going to discuss in detail some of the things that students have been struggling with related to anthropology. For example, why should we choose anthropology as an optional? Or should we just choose the anthropology as an optional on the basis of the things that we've heard around ourselves? For example, toppers are choosing this optional, or maybe you might have heard the idea that it is a smaller subject, or some people say that it is objective in nature. Few people take their optional subject on the basis of the idea that this optional subject has an overlap with other optional subjects. That is also one of the things that we generally see sometimes students following as an idea before choosing their optional subject. So before starting an elaborate discussion about the syllabus, about the way and strategy that we are going to follow in pursuing our anthropology optional at the VisionIAS from 15th of July, I want to introduce myself before that. My name is Mangal Singh. I've been teaching anthropology for past 4 years. And what you see on the screen behind me are some of the toppers whom I have mentored myself with anthropology as an optional. For example, here you see Pooja Jha, her rank was rank 82. She qualified with anthropology as an optional. And you might have seen her in the news right now. She's into the foreign services, where she gave the answer back to the Bangladesh High Commission when they showed the wrong map of India. Anyways, so you see some of these people who have qualified, and I have mentored them personally. For example, when you see here, Savi Balkunde, her rank is 517. She was struggling to score better in the mains examination in the anthropology optional. Initially, in one of the attempts in 23, she had around 180 marks only. And one of the reasons for such low scores in anthropology is that people sometimes go with some preconceived notions or the problems which are there. There are certain preconceived ideas which are going on in their mind through which they start preparing for this examination. That is why that kind of preparation does not fetch good results in the actual examination. So that is why, on the basis of the experiences of my years of teaching, from my experience of mentoring and teaching so many students of anthropology, my focus will be on making you understand that how exactly should one prepare the anthropology as an optional subject, what are the things that should be considered before choosing this optional subject, and your target should be nothing less than 300 marks in the examination. So right from there, we are going to discuss the important aspects of anthropology as an optional. But before that, let us simply begin by saying that, or begin with focusing on understanding of the idea that what exactly anthropology is. And we are going to take an overview of the syllabus, and then with the overview of the syllabus, with the overview of the understanding of the syllabus, then we are going to move on to the next idea, which is how exactly can we prepare it so that we are able to fetch the best of the marks in anthropology. Now, if you look at anthropology as an optional, or if you look at anthropology as a term that you see here, even if you are not introduced to this idea of anthropology, first let us understand what is the meaning of this term anthropology. Because without understanding and having an overview of the syllabus and the nature of the discipline, it would be really difficult for us to pick up the optional subject or to choose the discipline of anthropology properly. Now see, when you look at the word anthropology, it is derived from two terms, anthropos and logos. Anthropos simply refers to man, whom we today refer to as human being. Well, if you look at logos, it means to study, and not just a general study of the man, but actually it is the scientific study of man. It is the scientific study of the man that is the primary focus of anthropology as a discipline. So we got to make it really clear right from the beginning that what is the subject that we are dealing with here, what is the discipline that we are dealing with here. If we develop an understanding of that, we'll be able to make more sense of it. Now you might say that other disciplines would also claim that they are also studying various aspects of the man only. For example, is political science not studying the aspects of the man? Or is sociology not studying certain social aspects of the man? For that matter, many of the disciplines like economics is studying the economic aspects of the man. So what is it that is so different about anthropology? And once we understand that part, we will be able to make better sense of what this discipline is. Because I tell you, before choosing any optional subject, one of the primary criteria that students need to follow, you might have heard people talking about different kinds of ideas related to the choice of the optional subject, that maybe you choose an optional subject which has been performing well in the recent times, or choose that optional subject which has an overlap with the general studies. That is also one of the considerations. You might have heard about various other factors. For example, you choose the optional subject on the basis of how many people have scored more than 300 marks. But let me tell you, the optional subject that you choose has a greater challenge, which is of the idea that you need to spend around 6 to 8 months. You need to spend around 6 to 8 months in fully preparing this optional. Plus, if you look at the weightage of the optional subject, it is around 500 marks. But even if the weightage is 500 marks, and if general studies is about 1000 marks, you will appreciate that in general studies, the scores of the toppers would hover around 400 to 430. And almost everybody scores in this range only. But when you, on the other hand, look at the scores that you can get in the optional subjects, and problem is, in the optional subjects, many a times there are students who are not able to score really well, and that can create a lot of problem. For example, if you see the scores in the optional subjects in anthropology, I have seen people scoring even 180 marks. Like I told you about the Savi Balkunde's idea, the Savi Balkunde, who is one of the toppers, she secured only 180 marks in one of her attempts, 185 marks. So scores can be as low as 180, and they can be as high as 300 marks sometimes. Meaning, the range of marks in the optional subject has a range of about 100 marks. The variation in the marks that you get in the optional subject is about 100 marks. And if that variation is this huge, this wide, it can actually cost you the selection. It can cost you a rank in the examination. And if that is the case, it will be a bigger difficulty that you're going to follow. That is a difficulty that we need to handle and address right at the beginning itself, right? And that is why choosing the right kind of optional is very, very important. Now, some of the criteria which are used by the students in choosing the anthropology as an optional is, first criteria that they follow generally is the idea that it is a subject that has been performing well. Regarding anthropology, one of the perception is it is a small subject. Plus, Few people come with a preconceived notion that it is a subject that can only be chosen by people who have biology as a background, or they have some background in scientific subjects like biology or zoology or botany. It is better for them. I would like to tell you that let us not go with any of these perceptions, and my suggestion is to go and choose your optional subject on the basis of the interest that you have in that subject. Why am I telling this thing is, if you will not have interest in that subject, first thing is, it will be really difficult for you to stay with that subject for around 6 to 8 months. And if you are not able to focus on it, if you do not have a genuine curiosity in that subject, it will be a disastrous step that you can take in choosing any of the optional subject. So my suggestion again is choosing the optional subject on the basis of the interest. But how do you identify that do you have interest in anthropology? One of the problems with anthropology is nobody has studied it in your school time. Plus, we rarely see students graduate in anthropology choosing for appearing in the UPSC examination. Many of the toppers who have qualified with anthropology optional, the good thing about them is nobody was from anthropology graduation background. I understand students from engineering background also choose other subjects like political science or sociology, but the point with anthropology is rarely would you find a topper with anthropology optional having anthropology in either graduation or might have studied that in school time. So that becomes a problematic thing that we need to understand. Point is, if you have seen this as an idea, my suggestion is that anthropology is something that is not restricted to people of any particular graduation background. Rather, it is a subject which is open to everyone to pursue. And there are certain inherent strengths of this optional that we need to look at. But before that, I've already highlighted that besides all those strengths which are there, a very good thing about anthropology is that if you develop interest in the anthropology, and it actually touches upon various aspects of the mankind, and if you're able to fully comprehend those aspects, it is going to be a discipline that is going to be very interesting, and you are going to find a lot of interest in understanding that idea. So the point is, we are going to slowly begin with what this discipline is and how exactly do we need to score well. So like I started my discussion by saying that anthropology as a term is composed of two terms, anthropos and logos. Anthropos meaning to study man, and logos means to study. Meaning to study the man scientifically is basically anthropology. Anthropology basically deals with what? Scientific study of the man, not just any other study of the man. And like I told you, that other disciplines are also studying what? Various aspects of the man only. It is nothing new. Political science is studying the political aspects of the man, or let's say the economics is studying the economic aspects of the man. So what is it that is so different about anthropology? For that, we will have to go through some kinds of definitions that we have of the anthropology that have been provided by many of the thinkers. One of the definitions that has been provided by a famous anthropologist whose name is Melville J. Herskovits. He defines anthropology as the study of man and his works. He defines anthropology as the study of the man and his works. Further, there is another anthropologist whose name is Clyde Kluckhohn, who highlights that out of all the disciplines that study various aspects of the man, anthropology comes nearest to the total study of the mankind. Anthropology comes nearest to the total study of mankind. Now, what exactly do these thinkers mean by these definitions? If you look at this first definition, when Herskovits says that it is the study of man and his works, it simply refers to the idea that anthropology wants to deal with, one, the biological aspects of the man, and second, the cultural aspects of the man. Anthropology wants to deal with the biological aspects as well as what? As well as the cultural aspects of the man. Now, if you look at anthropology as a discipline, you are going to understand that anthropology basically tries to address a very fundamental question about the human beings, and that question is, how did we become the humans that we are today? Both biologically and second, social culturally. It basically tries to do what? It basically tries to deal with the idea that it is a discipline that focuses upon answering a very fundamental question about the human beings, that is, how did the humans become the humans that they are today, both biologically and social culturally. Now, this is a question that has always bothered the intellectual people since the ancient times. For example, many people in the past have tried to answer this question, that why the human beings are so unique. If you see yourself, we all are what? We all are biological animals. We all are biological animals, but there is some difference between the humans and the other animals which are there. And some people have wondered that the human beings are intelligent, or they are extraordinary, they have a bigger brain size. All of this is an idea that was there in the minds of many of the intellectual people of their times. But the point was, many of them resorted to religion to address this fundamental question about the human beings. And religion said that, mostly the Europeans, they said that, or the Bible said the idea, created the idea that human beings are actually a special creation. The human beings are a special creation of God. And that is why they are unique. Even if you ask a layman, he would come up with certain explanations of the idea that why man is so unique, or why man is so different as compared to the other animals which are there. But nobody tries to address this question fundamentally on the basis of what? The scientific aspects, or they do not try to explain those ideas on the basis of what? Certain scientific understanding, that how did the humans become the humans that they are. Besides understanding and explaining this fundamental question about the humans, that how humans became the humans that they are biologically and social culturally, anthropology does not just stop here. It also wants to understand what is the correlation between the biological aspects of the man and the cultural aspects of the man. At the same time, it also wants to find out how the human culture has influenced the human biology. And I'll tell you a very fundamental thing, that how anthropology began as a discipline that is something that is going to tell us a lot about what the anthropology as a discipline deals with. Now, if you look at this idea, we need to understand that European society was witnessing certain changes in the 14th and the 15th century. And if you go through a bit of world history, you're going to find out that the medieval period in Europe was marked by a feudal economic system, as well as there was extreme influence of religion, and that is why this period was termed as Dark Ages. However, in the modern period, we see certain sequential changes happening in the European society. For example, the first thing was Renaissance. Secondly, with Renaissance, science became a way of understanding the natural world. Renaissance actually did what? It brought the man to the center of discourse. It brought man to the center of discourse. What's discourse? What exactly does it mean? Now, during this period, actually, the Europeans rediscovered the ancient Greco-Roman texts. What did the Europeans do? Europeans actually rediscovered the ancient Greco-Roman texts. When they studied those ancient Greco-Roman texts, one thing that became clear to them is, in the ancient European society, actually, the influence of religion was very less. The influence of religion was partly minimal. However, the medieval Europe was becoming more influenced by the religion. And when religion dominates the society and its all the aspects, one problem that is created in the society is it leads to dogma, it leads to superstition, and actually everything is then left to the destiny and the fate. Human beings understand that whatever is happening to them is a result of the divine powers, and they do not have any control over the things that are happening around themselves. That thing was questioned by the Renaissance. And that is why we say what? It brought man to the center of the discourse. Simply meaning the idea that now everything had to be thought from the perspective of what? Human beings. For example, they started reflecting in the art of that time period. It started reflecting in the architecture of that time period. It started reflecting in the literature of that time period. It started reflecting in the sculptures of that time period, and even in the thought process stories everywhere. The human beings became the center of all the discussions. And when you say terms like humanities, actually the origin of that is from this time period, Renaissance only. Then basically, when the people started to focus upon man as the center of the discourse and not seeing things from the only religion perspective, what basically transformed is humans started to realize the potential that they had. Humans started to believe, or basically the Europeans started to believe in the immense potential that the mankind has, immense potential that the human beings have. When they started believing in this immense potential that the human beings had, they also started to question the traditional ideas. They started to question the existing ideas. And when they started questioning those existing and traditional ideas, it actually transformed the way in which people approach the world around themselves. For example, religion would say that, or Bible at that time would say that, the earth is flat. And nobody would go on a long sea journey or on a sea voyage because they felt that if they go far enough from the horizon, they might fall down. Why? Because they thought that the world is flat. Right? But when people questioned this idea, when people tried to understand it through science, they found out that the earth is not flat, earth is rather a round body. And you would not fall flat if you start the sea voyages. So this belief, the belief in the potential of the mankind actually transformed everything. And you might have studied it in modern history, and you're going to study it in the modern history, that actually the Europeans started to carry out these journeys, adventurous journeys for colonialism in this period only. For example, Vasco da Gama started his voyage in this time period only. Columbus started his voyage in this time period only because they started experimenting. They started becoming adventurers. They started believing in the potential that the mankind had. Yes? So Renaissance transformed the basic value system of the society in the Europe's case. Science became a way, meaning you're not going to blindly believe how religion has explained any phenomena. For example, let's say earthquake comes up. When earthquake comes up, religion would say that it is because of the sin of the mankind. Because human beings have committed enough sin, the humans are now facing the wrath of the God. But science would not accept such an explanation. Science would want to observe the phenomena. They would want to see it carefully. They would want to understand the underlying rules and the laws which govern this particular phenomena. And when you study geography, you find that scientists, through a lot of experiments and research, have been able to come to the conclusion that the Earth's plates are not stationary, rather they have been moving over the molten lava that is there inside the Earth. And that is leading to plate tectonics, submergence, divergence, and sometimes the sliding of the plates against each other, and it is leading to different types of earthquakes. So it is a scientific explanation. What science does is, it simply makes you and stops you from just believing that things are being governed by the God only. It can actually improve the conditions of the mankind. Science basically to focus upon what? Questioning the established norms, thinking critically, thinking rationally, thinking logically, observing objectively, right? And observing empirically, at the same time trying to find out the general laws that govern a particular phenomena that is being observed. And this is what science does. It is a very different way of understanding the world as compared to religion. Religion earlier claimed that they have figured out everything here. That was the claim of the religion, but that is not the case here. Religion has not been able to explain many of these ideas scientifically. So science became a way of understanding things. And science actually led to so many discoveries. For example, the law of gravitation, law of motion, how the astronomical planets are arranged, how planets move around the Earth. That is a very fundamental thing that we know. Everything started to be seen through the science's perspective. When people started to understand that how the world works around themselves, how the nature works around themselves, another development that was parallelly happening was the birth of capitalism, which was an economic system which was very different from the feudal economic system, because feudal economic system was largely rural. Feudal system had a way, it was mostly based on what? Agriculture. Feudal lords would control the agricultural lands. All the people living in the rural areas would actually work for the feudal lord. They would provide goods and services to the feudal lord. In exchange, the feudal lord is going to give you some things in either cash or in kind, right? But the overall structure of the society would be that the feudal lords are going to control every aspect of the rural society. That was replaced by largely capitalism, wherein people who had capital would invest into businesses. That was a very different model, because everybody would be working in a very different way in the capitalistic society. Because the fundamentals through which the capitalism was created is based on some of the theories provided by prominent thinkers like Max Weber, or What are the problems in the capitalism? We get to know by understanding how Karl Marx has explained the problems with the capitalism. Anyways, capitalism became a way, and today we are living in a capitalistic world where money is important, where demand and supply is important, where profit making is important, which was not the case in the feudal system. Feudal system was luxurious. Luxurious meaning only for meeting the luxurious needs of the feudal lords the system was designed, in which the welfare of the common people could not be achieved. Capitalism initially claimed that it is going to bring about what? Welfare of the common people. But anyways, capitalism came, but capitalism and science merged to bring about another transformation in the European society, which was that capital was invested in creating inventions on the basis of the scientific understanding of the world. And that led to the birth of Industrial Revolution. That led to the birth of Industrial Revolution. So Renaissance started, science started, capitalism began, Industrial Revolution began. And when Industrial Revolution started, it led to the birth of another phenomena, which was Industrial Revolution-driven urbanization in the European society. When Industrial Revolution-driven urbanization started in the European society, people started migrating from the rural areas into the urban areas, and the basic structure of the society transformed. For example, rural society had certain features like it was a face-to-face society. It was a small society, everybody knew everybody, and there was extreme level of social control. There was extreme level of social control. While when people came to the urban areas, they found that this is an anonymous society. It is a society which is based on individualism. Do you get it? Point is, if we come out of our traditional areas where we live and we start living in the urban areas, you yourself might find that actually we feel more free in the urban areas from the social control. Social control is not that great in the urban areas. It is a very prominent thing that we find in the urban areas. Urban areas are very different from the rural areas. Rural areas, mein, every day the society is controlling and seeing you and it's watching you. From the moment you get out of your bed till the moment you enter into the bed, actually you find what? You find that in this case the society is controlling you. But while in the urban areas you find that there is no social control. You might have different other stresses in the urban areas, but social control is something that is not existing in the urban areas. Right? And that is why the slogan that became famous during the Industrial Revolution and the urbanization, and when the people started moving from rural to the urban areas, was that city air feels free. The idea was, when you go to the cities, you feel that freedom. And you might yourself might have observed it when you moved out of your families to live in your colleges, and there the social control was far more lesser. So it was a fundamental change. So basically you see what? Things that started from the 14th and the 15th century, which we call as the modern period, brought about all these changes. And today we are also witnessing all these changes. India used to be a traditional society. That society is now transforming and is being replaced by the modern society. That society is transforming and now being replaced by what? A modern society which is borrowing and following many of such ideals which we see here. Today everyone talks about the idea that we should think rationally. We should think logically. What is the science behind a phenomena? Right? What is my self-interest? What is the logic behind this thing? Or what exactly is there in the urban areas? You might have seen people blaming the urbanization in India that it is very haphazard, it is messy, the roads are not good, pollution is there. But even then, why everybody wants to come to the urban areas? There might be something related to the urbanization as a process. So it had transformed what? The basic fundamentals of the European society, the same thing that we are witnessing today in our society also. For example, if you look at our society today, individualism is coming up. Marriage, many of the people are seeking divorces. Why? Because individualism, individual liberty, their freedom, their pride, that is more important to them. Right? Rather than trying to make marriage somehow work. So the fundamentals of the people in the society have actually transformed. They're completely different now. They're not the same anymore. These changes were associated with a bigger change, which is going to help us understand what anthropology is all about. What was that change? Another event that started unfolding with all these changes that were happening in the European society is something that we call as colonialism. Meaning, the Europeans started to colonize the people living in Africa, Asia, and of course Americas. You might remember the famous voyage of Columbus, and in Asia you might remember Vasco da Gama, how he arrived at the coast of the India. When they were doing this thing, three important things that led to the development of anthropology was, first, they observed flora and fauna. Whenever the Europeans went for a sea voyage, actually they took with themselves a person called as naturalist. What would he observe? He would find that the flora and fauna that is found in these continents was very different from the flora and fauna that was known to the European people. Europeans believed at that point of time that actually all the flora and fauna that is known to the world has actually been mentioned in the Bible. But when they went to these colonies, they found that this flora and fauna is very different from the flora and fauna mentioned in the Bible. Meaning they found flora and fauna which was different from the biblical flora and fauna, right? Or the one that was mentioned in the Bible. Second development that was associated with colonialism, which actually had a role to play in the beginning of the anthropology, was that they found material remains from the past. Why did they find the material remains from the past? It is because colonial powers, when they colonized the colonies, when they colonized the people living in, let's say, Asia, Africa, or Americas, one thing that they observed was they wanted to rule those areas, and for ruling them effectively, they started creating an administrative structure, they started creating a political structure, and at the same time, they started also concluding certain engineering projects. For example, when British came to India, they transformed the basic economy of India, they transformed the basic administration of India, they transformed the basic political system of India. And associated with that, they also introduced new technology into India, like they started railway construction, which was for the benefit of the British themselves. Which was basically what? Which was basically for the benefit of the British people themselves. Now what happens is, when they started conducting those engineering projects, like let's say railways, or let's say the development of the hydropower projects, when they were trying to do that thing, they ended up finding out various material remains of the past civilizations. For example, one of the famous anecdotes and instances is, when the British were actually constructing the railway in the northwestern parts of India, the present-day Pakistan, when they started excavating the earth, they actually got hold of a lot of bricks. They started using those bricks for the railway construction project. When they started using those bricks for the railway construction projects, later they found out that actually these were the bricks that belonged to what? The Indus Valley civilization. These were the bricks that belonged to the Indus Valley civilization, which surprised everybody later that these are remains of the past culture. These are not things that have been created by the contemporary human societies living in that area. And that led to the birth of another important component of anthropology that we are going to discuss later. Along with that, they found out fossils of extinct species. They would get hold of bones or teeth of some of those species which are not alive today, which have become extinct today. You cannot find out those living species today. Yet, you would find that these fossils or extinct species will have some similarity with the present living species. For example, let's say they get hold of the bones and teeth of an individual who looks a bit similar to the mankind, who looks very similar to the human beings, but still is very different from the modern human beings. Like, you might have heard about some of the human species like Homo habilis, Homo erectus, Homo neanderthalensis. They are all human species, but they are very different from the modern humans, or the Homo sapiens that we are today. Getting my point? So the point is, when you see this as an idea, they found these fossils, and this aroused what? A lot of curiosity, that what are these fossils like? What connections do they have? Why did these fossils become extinct? Who created these material remains? Why flora and fauna is different from the biblical flora and fauna? Because overall nature of the society was transforming when people started thinking from a scientific perspective, when people started questioning the religious dogma and the ideas which were there. Yes? Third important thing was, when they colonized these areas, one very important thing that they observed was the people living in these areas had very different practices from the European society. For example, marriage in European society was monogamous. Monogamous meaning one man marrying one woman at the same time. At one point of time, only one man is going to marry one woman. It is a monogamous marriage, which we usually see around ourselves. When they went to these colonies, they found that there are certain societies which practice something called as polyandry, one female marrying more than one females. Polygyny, one man marrying more than one females at the same point of time. Or for that matter, religion. Europeans thought that they follow what is called as monotheism. Europeans followed what is called as what? Monotheism, that is, they only follow a religion which has one God, one holy book, and one holy symbol. While when they came to these colonies, they found that people do not focus or people do not follow a religious idea which only has one God. Rather, there are multiple gods. And that was termed as what? Polytheism. So they wanted to understand that why these societies are different. They wanted to understand that why these cultures are different. Why the colonies that they have colonized, why do they have such peculiar cultural practices? And many of these cultural practices arouse curiosity in their minds. One, they wanted to understand them for better governing these people. For example, when British came to India, they wanted to understand the Indian society. And in their quest of understanding the Indian society, they actually studied the Indian caste system. And that study has actually shaped our today's understanding of the caste system. People have questioned the idea, and you might have seen some people claiming that caste is a colonial construct. Why? Because British made the first systematic attempt to even record and study those aspects of the Indian society. So one of the objectives in the minds of the colonial people was to understand the society better so that they are able to govern better, so that they are able to extract as much revenue as possible from these societies. Secondly, with the European colonization, actually Christian missionaries also followed the colonial administrators. And their purpose was to convert them to Christianity. For that also they started recording the cultural practices of the people living in this area. Meaning, when they encountered people living in these colonies having culture which was very different from their own culture, they wanted to understand these other cultures. And actually these three developments led to the birth of the discipline called as anthropology. The first development of understanding the flora and fauna, why it is different from the biblical flora and fauna, led to the birth of what we call as the taxonomy. That is, all of the flora and fauna was documented. The whole of flora and fauna that they found was documented, and it was documented and a classification was created, a nomenclature was created, scientific nomenclature, on the basis of similarities and differences. For example, the flora and fauna basically refers to what? The living beings. We are living in a biological world. Biological world meaning what? We have living beings around ourselves. For example, plants are living beings, animals are living beings. So how can you divide the whole of the biological world? How can you divide the whole of the biological world? That should be a natural curiosity in your mind. You might find that living beings primarily are of two types. One are plants, another one are animals. It's a very fundamental thing that anybody would understand. First is that what exactly are these plants? And why exactly do we have animals? And both of them are living. So what is the difference between them? You all might have studied in books कि इसका cell wall होता है, इसमें cell wall नहीं होता है. These are very fundamental differences, but there is one primary thing that governs the difference between the plants and the animals, and which is plants are autotrophs. They create their own food through photosynthesis. While animals, they do not create their own food. They do not produce their own food. They are not food producers. They are heterotrophs. Right? Either they would eat plants or they would eat the other animals which are part of the living beings. Meaning you could divide the whole of the living world, you could divide all of the living beings into these two broad categories, plant kingdom and animal kingdom. That is what is called as taxonomy. For example, in the animal kingdom, you might find further subdivisions on the basis of similarities and the differences. For example, in animal kingdom, you have one sublayer which is called as vertebrates, meaning all those animals will be included in the vertebrates category who have something called as vertebral column or a spinal cord. Animals which do not have will not be a part of this thing. Right? Or for that matter, there is something called as mammals. Or who are mammals? Mammals are basically those animals which feed their young ones through the mammary glands. Breastfeeding that you see is not just present in human beings, it is present in any other mammal that you see around yourself. It is either dogs or your cows or any other animal that feeds their young ones, the newborns, through the breast is basically what? Mammal. So what you see is on the basis of all these similarities and the differences, they arranged all the living beings, gave them a scientific nomenclature into a hierarchical layers. And that is called as what? Taxonomy. Carl Linnaeus was the person who actually created this taxonomy. But still he believed that all of the living beings are actually creation of the mankind. All of the living beings are what? They are creation of the mankind, and my job is just to document them on the basis of similarity and differences. One good thing about the European colonizers was, although there were so many bad things also associated with them, one of the good things was that they would document everything scientifically. Their approach of recording things was primarily very, very scientific. Now, Charles Darwin did not believe, Charles Darwin, who is like the very important person in one of the aspects of anthropology, he went on a sea voyage on a ship called as HMS Beagle. And on the basis of his observations at one of the islands, which is called as Galapagos Islands, and he was studying a lot of literature that was existing in that time period, he came with the conclusion that actually all of the living beings have not been created by the God and they have never remained the same. Just for example, if you look at the world around yourself, you would believe that the world is always going to remain the same. Things are not going to change much. For example, today you see the plants, they are going to remain always the same. Because we only think in what? Our lifetime period. We only think in 80, 90 years span. But if you think at a bigger time scale, you would come to believe that this is how the world was created and we are here and we are ruining this world and eventually the world is going to end. This is one of the ways through which you can understand the world around yourself. However, Darwin believed that it has never remained static. Rather, one of the things is that actually all of the living beings that you see today have evolved from the previously existing species. All of the living beings, all of this flora and fauna that you see today in the contemporary times, in the present times, whatever you see today is actually what? Is actually a result of, or these are actually, this flora and fauna has evolved from the previously existing species. And this led to the birth of this theory of evolution. Darwin gave us an idea that if you look at the evolution, he came up with his famous work, which was which is called as what? Origin of Species. Origin of species by the means of what is called as natural selection. By the means of natural selection. What did Darwin say? Origin of species by the means of natural selection. Okay. Origin of species by the means of natural selection. He highlighted that all of the living species that you see on the planet Earth today, all of the living beings that you see on the planet Earth today, have actually evolved from the previously existing species. This was his broad idea and contours. Meaning what people believed earlier, his belief was, earlier people believed that the flora and fauna which was found in biblical flora and fauna was different from the flora and fauna that was actually found in these colonies. At the same time, second important development was when Darwin observed that things that you see around yourself, the living beings that you see around yourself, have never remained static. Rather, they have evolved over a period of time, they have changed over a period of time, and he gave this idea that all of the living species have evolved from the previously existing species. And that is why he highlighted that the origin of the species is not God. The origin of species is basically through the mechanism or the theory that he claimed as evolution. And actually, the whole of physical anthropology is based on this theory of evolution only. This forms the base of the whole of physical anthropology, or what is termed as the biological anthropology. When Darwin highlighted the mechanism of evolution through something called as natural selection, he actually explained the idea that there are certain traits in a given population which actually help the individuals in that population to adapt to particular environmental conditions. Adaptation simply means what? It is going to help them in surviving. And over a period of time, the frequency of these traits increase. This is a very fundamental of the nature of natural selection. Even if you don't know, we're going to study it in detail when we study it in the class. He highlighted that the mechanism of the evolution of the species was through natural selection. At a broader level, you might have heard the term survival of the fittest. He highlighted this thing. He said that these traits are basically adaptive. Sometimes there will be certain traits which are maladaptive. When the traits are maladaptive, meaning what? Traits which are maladaptive will lead to what? Maladaptive traits are actually going to lead to elimination of those individuals who possess those kind of traits. Point was, these traits are going to get inherited in the subsequent generations. But Darwin did not know the mechanism of inheritance, which was later told to us by a person called as Mendel, and that led to another birth of another field that we study in the biological anthropology, which is genetics. Because later it was found that actually all of the physical traits that you see in the human beings are a result of what? The genes. The mechanism of inheritance is through genes, which are basically what? Which are basically present in your nucleus of the cell, which is on something called as chromosomes, which basically you get one pair of chromosome you get from mother, another one you get from the father, right? Total there are 23 such pairs, total 46 chromosomes are present inside your nucleus. One was theory of evolution, which highlighted that this is how the species have evolved. Secondly, genetics helped us in understanding how exactly is the mechanism of natural selection working, how the genes actually interplay with the environment, and that leads to the survival of some of the individuals in that particular environmental condition. Survival of the fittest basically means people possessing certain kinds of advantageous genes, they are going to have better chances of surviving, and eventually the population you will only find people who possess those advantageous genes. Disadvantageous genes would eventually be eliminated. So genetics became another field that we need to study here. Thirdly, when Darwin highlighted that all of the living species that you see today, all of the living animals, plants, everybody you see here, they have evolved from the previously existing species. If they have evolved from the previously existing species, there might be some evolutionary relationship between the living beings that are today. Meaning, let's say we are human beings. Are we related to any other living animals on this planet today? That was a curiosity at that point of time. Today we have enough idea. But at that point of time, people thought that are humans very, very different? Or do they have any connection with the other living species that are there? Anthropological studies and evolutionary studies have actually thrown light on the idea that human beings in the animal kingdom are part of an order which is called as order primate, in which three set of individuals are found, primarily monkeys, apes, and humans. Monkeys, apes, and humans. And we find out that these similarities between the apes and the humans is primarily because of an evolutionary linkage. That is, the modern apes that you see today and the humans that you see today. You might have heard this idea that humans have evolved from the monkeys and the apes. Humans have not evolved from these monkeys and the apes which are living with us today. Actually, the humans and the monkeys and the apes had a common ancestor at one point of time, which was an ape-like ancestor. So at best we can say what? These apes are our cousins. For example, you might have heard that humans have evolved from the chimpanzees. It is a wrong statement. Humans have not evolved from the chimpanzees. Rather, both humans and chimpanzees might have had an ancestral species which shared the traits of both the chimpanzees and the human beings. Right? To understand the similarities and the differences between the closest individuals to the man has developed a field which is called as primatology. Has developed a field which is called as what? Primatology. So if I try to simplify whatever I've written here, first thing that we understand is the base of whole of physical anthropology is the evolution. Fair enough? At the same time, to expand our understanding of evolution, there is another field which is called as genetics. Third, to know if humans have evolved from the past species, which are those species with which humans are related, has developed a field called as primatology, which basically does what? Which basically compares the modern humans with those animals which have a evolutionary relationship. जिनका कोई common evolutionary relationship है, जैसे chimpanzees and the humans, they are the closest ones. Genetic studies say that we share around 98.6% of the genetic material, which is called as DNA. Right? And when we claim that these apes basically आपके chimpanzees हो गए, एक example हो गया, और भी बहुत सारे apes होते हैं. And if you see the humans, one thing that is going to become clearer to you is that apes and humans might have shared a common ancestral species, a common ancestral species, a common ancestral species. But which was this common ancestral species? How would we know this thing? Which was this common ancestral species? How are we going to ascertain that? And that thing was, or that thing became known to us by studying what is called as the fossils. If you remember that colonialism led to three important queries in their minds. One was the flora and fauna different from the biblical flora and fauna. Second was the material remains of the past. Third was the fossils of the extinct species. And these were these extinct species which had connections with the modern living species. And because anthropology is only the study of the man, we are interested in knowing those fossils which help us in understanding the evolution of man and not any other animal for that matter. Why? Because anthropology is the study of the man. Anthropos plus logos means to study the man scientifically. That has been the primary focus of anthropology per se. Right? So what we saw is evolution of the man is the fundamental thing. Of course, the evolutionary theory of the Darwin, genetics, there is primatology, and the study of the fossils. The study of the fossils is actually termed as paleontology, meaning the whole of physical anthropology revolves around something called as evolution of man. All these fields which help us in understanding the evolution of the man actually are dealt with in a field which is called as the biological anthropology. I hope this is pretty clear to everyone. And if you see the subdivisions of anthropology as a discipline, you are going to find that anthropology has been divided into 4 fields primarily. But broadly, if you look at these fields, you're going to find that one field is this physical, or what has been termed today as biological anthropology. And these 3 fields could broadly be related to something called as cultural anthropology. They could broadly be called as what? Cultural anthropology. Why they could be called as cultural anthropology? I'm going to come to it. Broad divisions of the discipline are in 2, physical and cultural. You see the syllabus yourself, you're going to find that the whole syllabus has been divided into 2 parts. But the point is, when we understand when we focus upon the preparation, we try to understand these topics in isolation. Like I told you how physical anthropology is, all the aspects are connected to each other. Students usually miss on this part. And when they miss on this part, they are not able to write effective answers. Because even when people think anthropology is easy, because the buzzword in the market is the anthropology is an easy discipline, you directly need to jump onto standard textbooks like Vivek Bhasme and Akshat Jain. You can directly jump onto toppers' notes. The problem with that is it does not develop understanding. It does not help you in understanding the interlinkages that exist between different parts of the syllabus, like I just explained it to you, although not in much detail, but I gave you a glimpse that all of these parts are connected to each other. They are not working in isolation. If you have this understanding, it will become easy for you to recall things, because you need to understand the gravity of the optional subject, which is that you have to express everything in those 6 hours. It is not possible for you to mug up everything. You are required to do some amount of mugging, but what is very important is you need to understand, you need to have that conceptual clarity. If you have that conceptual clarity, if you have that understanding, eventually it is going to translate in your examination. So such kind of correlations are important. So what we see here is, these are these 4 fields. Now, if you look at the broader contours of physical anthropology, like I've told you, what does it study? What is its focus area? I told you, the core of this physical anthropology is human evolution. Second is human genetics. Third is primatology. Phylogenetic status of what? Fossils. It is basically paleontological anthropology, right? And then, why do the presently living humans have so many differences? Why certain people have dark skins? Why certain people have white skins? Why certain people have taller heights? Why certain people are short? All of these differences that you see, why do we have so many physical differences? That is also one part of anthropology. Meaning, anthropology wants to study the man, first the biological aspects, from the past to the present, in the time, in the present space. It wants to study humans in the past and the present, temporally as well as spatially. Meaning, if it wants to focus upon the biological aspects, it wants to know how we were in the past and how we have become the way we are today in the present. If you remember, the first question that I raised in the beginning of this class was that the fundamental question that anthropology addresses is, how did we become the humans that we are today? Both biologically and social culturally. So if that was the question, that how did we become the humans that we are biologically, that question is addressed to us by the biological anthropology. Both in the past and in the present. What has shaped the modern biological humans? That is part of the physical anthropology. That is like the more fundamental core of the physical anthropology that we need to understand. Now I'll tell you another interesting thing, which is that when we have been able to come up with this idea that anthropology basically studies one, biological, and second, the cultural aspects. And to address this curiosity about the biological aspects, we have seen that it is studied on the basis of the theory of evolution, where we try to address who we are as human beings biologically. Fair enough question. But the second part is, what exactly is culture? Why human beings are cultural in nature? Why human beings have something called as culture? And if human beings have a culture, when did this culture begin? Simply see, if you compare the humans with the animals, a very fundamental level comparison. If let's say tomorrow, a chimpanzee decides that I want to go and live in the Arctic region, would the chimpanzee survive? Would it be possible for the chimpanzee to live in those colder conditions if that chimpanzee is not being accompanied by the human beings? Reverse the scenario. If a polar bear wants to come and live in the deserts in Rajasthan, will he be able to survive? Counterintuitive, of course. You would answer that they will not be able to survive because they will have to biologically adapt into those circumstances. Right or wrong? But what if I ask you that if a human being has to go and live and survive in the Arctic region or in the Antarctic region, will the human be able to survive? Biologically, if a human being goes naked and wants to try to survive in Arctic and Antarctic, he is going to die the first day. Not possible for him to survive. But even then, you all know that human beings are somehow going to survive. Why are they going to survive? Because a human being, if he wants to go and live in those conditions, he is going to accompany himself with a warm jacket, is going to use fire, is going to live in a house there, he's going to create a house there, he's going to create a tent there, he's going to create those artificial conditions in which he can survive. Right? And that is something called as culture. That is something called as culture, because human beings have created a world around themselves. These are all creations of the mankind, which is called as what? One thing that you clearly see is the materials that human beings have created around themselves. These are called as what? Material cultures. Today, if you see our interaction that is happening, it is happening through the digital mode. Who created this digital mode? Human beings. God did not create it. Does any other animal have this? No. Human beings are the only animals on this planet who can do this thing, who can create things. This pen, this TV, this camera, this YouTube channel where we are connecting, all of these are what? Creations of the mankind only. Does any other animal have that kind of setup? Or for that matter, today we are living in summers in India. And we are seeing extreme humidity, extreme heat. Why are we even able to conduct this class? Because we have created something called as air conditioners. No other animal has that thing. So natural curiosity should be that why only human beings have such things and not other animals? One of the answers could be, maybe the God gave us that capability. One of the answers could be that maybe God gave us this capability. Another answer could be, maybe during the course of evolution, we developed certain capabilities which enabled us to have this capability of creating these material things which we call as what? The material aspects of the culture. I'm assuming all of you would agree with me on this fact that human beings actually create artificial environment around themselves and they survive in that kind of environment, while no other animal has this capability. Which is something that should arouse natural curiosity of every individual, that why human beings have this thing. Yes or no? I hope all of you would agree that. Then see, I'll talk about another fundamental difference between the humans and the animals. Both humans and the animals are biological beings. And by the virtue of being biological beings, both of them do something called as sexual reproduction. Which basically involves a biological male and a biological female to involve in a sexual activity to reproduce offsprings, यानी कि बच्चे पैदा करने के लिए. Human beings would follow sexual reproduction, animals would also do sexual reproduction. But how would the animals choose their partner and how would the humans choose their partner? If today a human being decides that I want to produce my child, I want to have my offsprings, I want to reproduce, would that human being be able to exercise this choice immediately? And what would the animal do in such a circumstance? Animal क्या करेगा? Animal randomly किसी भी mate को choose करके mating करेगा. Human beings में you cannot mate randomly for reproduction purposes. In human beings, there is something called as marriage, which governs this simple biological sexual activity, which is not present in any other animal. I'm assuming that none of you might have seen marriage happening between dogs, or between monkeys, or between animals, or cows. No. It is something that is only existing in the human societies. Or for that matter, do you have religion in animals? Do we have religion in animals? Or do we only have religion in the human beings? You might have never seen chimpanzees talking about their gods. Or, like famous historian also who has an anthropological tilt, Yuval Noah Harari, he talks about this in his book Sapiens, and he says that if you go to a monkey and if you ask him that you give me these bananas because in the heaven you will get a lot of bananas, he will never give you those bananas. But if you ask a human being is going to give you that. Or if you tell a human being, if you tell a monkey or a chimpanzee that this is a 500 rupee note, please take it and give me those bananas, he will not give you. Well, human beings are going to give you that banana if they feel that these 500 rupees are more. Which simply means what? Human beings live their life very differently. Our way of life is very different as compared to the animals. Our behaviors are very different as compared to the animals. Yes or no? Again here, why is our behavior very different from the animals? This is something very fundamental to the anthropology. The point is we are different as compared to the other animals because again we have something called as culture, and here our behaviors are actually governed by what? The non-material aspects of the culture. We have created so many norms around ourselves. We have created so many norms, we have created so many values, we have created institutions. All of these things human beings have created. It is not something that is found in other societies, in other animals. It is not something that has been created by God for you. It is something that human beings might have created in the past. But when and how did human beings start developing these ideas, this material culture and this non-material culture? कब इंसान ने ये बनाना शुरू किया? कब हमने material और non-material aspects of the culture बनाना शुरू किया? That should be a very natural curiosity. कि क्या ये inherently हमारी capability थी? Was it an inherent capability of the human beings? Or is it something that we have developed over the course of evolution? This answer is provided to us by the discipline of anthropology. I told you that we try to understand who we are as biological beings through the theory of evolution provided to us by Charles Darwin, which is, I think, which is very clear to everyone now. But during the course of evolution, certain changes happen in the human biology, or you can simply say the anatomy, which helped us in developing something called as culture. Both materials that we have around ourselves and the non-material aspects of culture. Both of these capabilities were provided to us by the biological changes that happened over a period of time with the human beings. Like in biological anthropology, I told you that the modern apes and human beings have an evolutionary relationship by the idea that both of them might have shared a common ancestor. Meaning, let's say this common ancestor species might have had certain characteristics of the apes and certain characteristics of what? Humans. कुछ apes के characteristics होंगे, कुछ humans के characteristics होंगे, दोनों का एक common mixture आपको वहां दिख जाएगा, है? And we have already compared the apes and the humans in something called as primatology. Because we know that both of these are connected to each other and we can compare them. For example, genetic studies have highlighted that apes and humans share around 98.6% of the DNA. Now, if you compare the apes and the humans biologically, and this is very, very critical, one thing that we want to understand here is how do they move around on the planet Earth? कैसे move करते हैं एक जगह से दूसरी जगह पर? क्यों ये important है? Because the way you move is going to decide how successful you would be in getting the kind of food in the environment in which you are living. again, how you move on the planet Earth is going to decide how capable you are in getting the food in the environment in which you are living. Why? Because food is important for survival, and natural selection as a process works on the principle of survival of the fittest. Fittest person would be one who is able to get his food, one of the parameters for that. Right? Now, when you see the humans and the apes, this idea of moving around on the planet Earth is called as locomotion. कि कैसे एक जगह से दूसरी जगह पे ये जानवर जाते हैं. अगर आप apes को देखोगे, तो apes actually move on their 4 limbs. And their style of locomotion is called as quadrupedalism. जैसे हमारे 4 पैर हैं, 2 पैर हैं, 2 हाथ हैं. हम लोग तो 4 पैर पे, चारों पे नहीं चलते हैं. चिंपैंजीज चारों पर चलते हैं हैबिचुअली, कभी कभी 2 पे चलते हैं. ह्यूमन बींग्स दे मूव ओनली ऑन 2 limbs. And this style of locomotion is called as bipedalism. क्या बोलते हैं इसको अपन? Moving around on 2 limbs only. Lower limbs are used for walking. The 4 limbs are not used for walking. These are free. We can use it for any other purpose. Lower limbs are, or the hind limbs are only used for walking, while the 4 limbs are not used for walking. So maybe during this evolutionary process, when one branch evolved into apes, they carried on with quadrupedalism, while humans, they carried on with what? They developed this capability of something called as bipedalism. And this was by far the most important event in the evolutionary, biological evolutionary history of the mankind. This was a very fundamental event in the evolutionary history of the mankind, because that transformed everything for the human beings when it started. And they might have developed this capability only to survive in a particular kind of environmental condition, for survival, for perpetuating their species, which is explained to us by Charles Darwin through his theory of natural selection. Which is explained to us by Charles Darwin through his theory of natural selection. Now, when human beings started to develop this capability of bipedalism, from quadrupedalism, it brought about certain changes in the human anatomy, which played a very crucial role in the origins of something called as culture. And I already told you, culture basically involves what? Material things around ourselves, the tools that we have created, chairs, tables, houses, cameras, pen, everything that you see around your laptops, all of these are what? Material things. And non-material meaning things that govern us on a day-to-day basis. How to choose a partner, what kind of food to eat, right? Or what kind of gods to believe in. All of these are what? Non-material aspect of the culture. We are going to talk about that, but this is a very fundamental thing. ठीक है? When this happens, bipedalism meaning the capability of moving on only 2 limbs led to first change, which was freeing up of the 4 limbs. यानी कि हमारे हाथ फ्री हो गए, अब चलने के लिए काम नहीं आते हैं. Second, when our 4 limbs got freed, we saw certain changes happening in our palm. What were these changes? If you look at the palm of a monkey, of an ape, the thumb is like this. But if you look at the palm of a human being, the thumb is opposable. Opposable meaning it can move in all the directions. And this is a very crucial development that happened over the course of evolution. Not necessarily all the past species from which the humans have evolved had this capability. No evidence is there that they had this kind of capability. What this capability did is, it provided us with 2 capabilities. One is power grip, another one is precision grip. Power grip and precision grip. So, another change that happened is our thumb became opposable. Our thumb became opposable. And there are so many other changes, but we are not interested in that. Just for the sake of simplicity and to understand how human beings have evolved and developed a culture, we need to understand these very fundamental changes. What did this do to us? One, the four limbs could be used for some other purposes other than the locomotion. हमें चलने के लिए use नहीं करना इनको. And opposable thumb did what? It provided us the capability of one, power grip, two, precision grip. What these changes did is they enabled the humans to alter naturally occurring substances and use them as tools. What this did is, it basically provided us the capability to alter the naturally occurring substances and to develop tools. The evidence for this is the first tools that we created were by altering the naturally occurring stones. And that is why the first things that humans created by using these biological capabilities were the stone tools. Were the stone tools. Humans created what? Stone tools. Stone tools, how did they create? Because there were certain biological changes that were happening. And I told you in the beginning that anthropology tries to address a very fundamental question about the human beings, that how did we become the biological beings that we are today? Also, the cultural beings that we are today. Both of these are the fundamental questions that are addressed. If you look at the definitions of anthropology, like Hertzkovitz has said, it is the study of man and his works. What exactly did he mean by saying this thing? Man basically is biological aspects and how he developed the things around themselves, how he created these things. All of these things are what? Creation of the mankind. So works basically are what? Their culture. So when human beings first created the stone tools, over a period of time, they kept on developing these tools and the tools started to become better and better and better. We started stone tools millions of years back, and today we have created this whole world around ourselves. Today we are even going to the space. Why? Because we started making tools at one point of time. That was the beginning, which is still going on. We today dream of going to the Mars is because we could develop tools at that point of time. तब हमने वो शुरुआत की, आज से वहां से लेकर हम यहाँ पहुंचे. पहले हमने stone tool को alter किया. Today we are even altering the materials at a very nano scale also. It is possible because these changes in the biologically enabled us to do this thing. Right? So stone tools marked what? The beginning of what I told you as the material culture. And you all would agree with me on this fact that no other animal possesses such a capability of producing such kind of stone tools. Chimpanzees, they have some capability, but that is rudimentary. Human tools were far more sophisticated. Tools that you find in the past, they were far more sophisticated. Today, we can alter any naturally occurring substances by chemical reactions, by any kind of modification through heat, through pressure, and create a new thing altogether. No other animal can do that thing. Meaning the human biology enabled the human beings to have something called as culture. So if you look at the evidence, historically, evidence that has been provided by anthropology to us is, first, we developed bipedalism. Bipedalism brought about certain anatomical changes. यानी कि हमारी physical body में कुछ changes लेके आया. These anatomical changes actually enabled us to develop what is called as the stone tools. When we started creating these stone tools, eventually the evidence suggests that human brain size in proportion to their bodies actually increased later on. Brain size increase was not necessarily only instrumental in increasing intelligence of the mankind. With increasing brain size, actually the composition of the brain also transformed. Various parts which were associated with cognitive capabilities, यानी कि memory, abstract thinking, thinking about past, thinking about future, thinking about predetermined scenarios. All of these capabilities were present in the human beings, or human beings acquired these capabilities because our brain size and its structure transformed considerably. Human beings can think about past, they can think about their future, they can think about abstract ideas. All because they can think. They have an increased brain size. They can think about predetermined scenarios, that what would happen if tomorrow this thing happens in my life. I'm going to do this thing. I'm not going to do this thing. I'm going to take care of this thing. Where does this come from? It is not something that is present in any other animal. Dogs might not be bothered about their future. They don't want to become IAS officers. Only humans want to become IAS officers because they can think about future. Because they can think about future, they also want to secure their future. I hope all of you would agree to this. Chimpanzees do not have a race of trying to prove it to their father that I am a very good chimpanzee. Humans have this compulsion. Why? Because they can think. Because of their thinking, they have created so many things. Further, with this increased cognitive capability, eventually another transformation happened in our throat, which enabled us to have something called as speech. And this speech led to the development of something we call as the language. And language and cognitive capability together have done what? They have provided us with a unique capability of organizing and symbolizing the world around ourselves. पूरी हमारे आसपास की दुनिया को हमने नाम दे दिया है कुछ कुछ. If I ask someone to bring me a pen, he would not bring me a bottle of water. He would bring something like this, कि ये pen है. Or if I ask someone to bring me a camera, he would not bring me this. He would not bring me, let's say, this bottle of water again. या कुछ और चीज नहीं लेके आएगा. Meaning, we have terms for everything. We have symbolized everything around ourselves. If I say that bring a chair, nobody would bring me a table. Because chair is a word which is a symbol for something that we have here. Something that stands for something. This is a symbol. It is our language. Through language, we have actually developed symbols even for the complex emotions. For example, we have given terms to abstract things like love, friendship. We cannot explain this thing very properly, but we have symbolized that emotion. We have symbolized the emotions of tension, depression. All of these are symbols only that we have created, and we try to convey things on the basis of that abstract thinking and symbolization that we do. A famous anthropologist, Leslie White, said that human beings are different from the animals, or culture is unique to the human beings because humans are the only animals on this planet who can differentiate between water and holy water. No other animal can do that thing. आपके लिए नॉर्मल पानी होगा और गंगा जल होगा, या आपके लिए नॉर्मल पानी होगा और द वाटर दैट इज यूज्ड फॉर बैप्टिज्म इन द चर्च, दैट्स अ होली वाटर. चरणामृत होगा, दैट्स अ होली वाटर. Which is not a case for the other animals. And why do we have this special meaning for that holy water? Because we have created a symbol highlighting the importance of that thing. नॉर्मली हम खाना खाते हैं, लेकिन जब फास्ट वाले दिन हम खाना खाते हैं तो वो होली फूड होता है, वो सेक्रेड फूड होता है दैट वी आर कंज्यूमिंग. रमजान में हम खाते हैं, दैट इज अ सेक्रेड फूड. मीनिंग ओनली ह्यूमन बींग्स कैन डू दैट थिंग, नोबडी एल्स कैन डू दैट थिंग. So the point is, we created language, we created cognitive capabilities, and through this actually human beings created this whole ideas that you have today in the society. Ideas, norms, values, knowledge, institutions like marriage, family, kinship, economic organizations, political organizations, religion, everything was made possible because of these capabilities of increase in the brain size and the language that we have today. Meaning, stone tool marked the beginning of what is called as what? Material culture or not? And these changes later helped us in developing what? Non-material culture or not? It helped us in developing Material culture and non-material culture. The study of the material cultures and how it began is called as archaeology. And we have another field which is called as archaeological anthropology. Archaeology or archaeological anthropology basically deals with what? The study of beginning of material culture. And what enabled the beginning of this material culture? It was the biological changes. You might study the archaeology, for example, lower Paleolithic period, middle Paleolithic period in history also, but it is not going to give you that kind of insight that the anthropology is going to give you. Because anthropology wants to understand the human origins, how the humans became the humans that they are today. I think I'm fairly clear on this. Archaeological anthropology, which is another subfield of anthropology, is not an isolated field. It is actually associated with what? The biological aspects, which most of the students fail to understand and appreciate. Although anthropology looks like a simple discipline, it looks like a shorter discipline, the problem that students face is they think that all the parts are isolated, there is no coherence in the syllabus. Actually, there is a coherence. All of the parts are connected to each other. There is no bifurcation, or these are not isolated topics, all the parts are connected. And where do we study the non-material aspects of the culture? It is actually part of the social cultural anthropology. The non-material aspects of the human societies are studied by what? Social cultural anthropology. Right? And if you remember the discussion in the beginning, that colonialism first got hold of the flora and fauna, which was different from biblical flora and fauna, that led to the birth of whole physical anthropology or evolutionary biological anthropology, which helped us in understanding who we are as biological beings. Material remains from the past, stone tools, everything that we created, part of the archaeological anthropology. Fossils, paleontological anthropology, which actually helps us in understanding the human evolution. And non-material aspect of the culture, social cultural anthropology, basically dealt with what? Studying the other cultures. And because anthropology began in a colonial context, it has always focused upon tribal societies, indigenous societies, native societies, so-called pre-literate societies, pre-industrial societies, और so-called primitive societies. तभी तो बार-बार हम anthropology में देखते हैं tribals पढ़ते हैं. क्यों tribals पढ़ते हैं? Because anthropology's beginning is that. Although today the nature of anthropology has transformed considerably, but it started by focusing upon these simpler societies, these tribal societies, or which have been termed, many terms have been used. कभी बोलते हैं natives, कोई बोलता है aboriginals, कोई बोलता है indigenous communities, कोई बोलता है pre-literate societies, कोई बोलता है pre-industrial societies. All of this is part of the anthropology. Yes? So when you see it from this perspective, you will be able to better appreciate the syllabus now. If we go back again and see the part, physical anthropology, archaeology, cultural and linguistic. I hope everything now makes a lot of sense to you. It is making better sense to you as compared to what you might have come with a perception. And I want to tell you this thing that all of these parts are connected, and I added archaeology also here. Why did I add archaeology? Because biological, archaeological, linguistic, and then eventually what? Cultural. All of these are what? Changes that happen during the course of human evolution only. And that has led to the overall idea here. So if you look at the broader contours of physical anthropology, you will appreciate this idea that it is evolution, human genetics, human fossils and paleontology and primatology, and of course, there is what? There is social cultural anthropology later. And if you look at the social cultural anthropology, I have told you that the concept of culture is the core of social cultural anthropology. Because human beings are cultural beings. Human beings have created such elaborate culture around themselves. To sexually reproduce, they have created marriage. To take care of the young ones, they have family. To provide cohesion in the society, they have created religion, they have created political systems, they have created law, they have created everything. Yes? Meaning the core of social cultural anthropology is the concept of culture that we have been talking about. That what exactly is this culture? How did it begin? And how does it manifest today? What is the concept of the culture that we see today? Initially, people thought that, just a second. People thought that if you look at the idea of the culture, their basic understanding was that how human beings behave is basically genetic, or these things are inherited biologically. But if you look at the human beings actually learn all these ideas over their lifetime. They're not born with these capabilities. Although their genetics tell us that human genetics provide us the capability and potential of learning so many things. But what will the human beings learn is a consequence of where you are born. Just you might see a famous debate in the society. Some people would claim that vegetarian food is superior. Others would say that non-veg is superior. And both of these people will keep clashing on social media and everywhere. कि वेज खाना अच्छा है, जानवर को कैसे मार सकते हैं, जानवर तो मासूम होते हैं, बोल भी नहीं सकते हैं. All these kinds of things you might listen around yourself. होता है? This is something that you observe everywhere. वेज वाले बोलेंगे जानवर को क्यों मार दे रहे हो, नॉन वेज वाला बोलेगा कि तुम लोगों को प्रोटीन नहीं मिल रहा है, और अजीब सी एक डिबेट चलती रहती है. Right? But the veg people should ask themselves that why are they vegetarian in the first place? Was it something that was biological? Or was it just because they were born in a society which had a norm that they should follow vegetarian diet? I'll give you a very good example of this. Let us just look at the people who are eating non-vegetarian in northern parts of India. Uttar Pradesh, Delhi, Haryana, Punjab, Bihar, MP, Rajasthan. Would the people who are eating non-vegetarian food eat beef or let's say cow meat? Will they eat this kind of meat? No. Why? Because it is the culture, which is the belief that cow is a sacred animal. Cow is a sacred animal. It's a clear-cut belief that exists in the human societies. Not in all human societies, only in the North Indian society. It is a belief that cow is a sacred animal. And rarely would you find a North Indian eating something called as a dog, or a frog, or maybe a snake. What stops you from eating this if you are non-vegetarian? The norms that you are born with. Similarly, people who are born vegetarian, they are even wary of this idea that how can people eat non-veg? And people who are eating non-veg in the North Indian part, they would always wonder that how can people eat frogs? How can people eat snakes? How can people eat bats? For example, COVID was a result of eating of the bats in China. So most of our behaviors are actually cultural behaviors. Most of the behaviors that we have are the things that we have learned over a period of time. Most of the human behavior is learned over a period of time. We do not react. We do not act instinctively on the basis of our biology. Most of the times we have to act on the basis of what? Our cultural learnings. This is not something that comes inherently to us, biologically to us. Biologically, we have the capability of learning, and it is greater as compared to any other animal. ह्यूमन बींग्स सबसे ज्यादा चीजें सीख सकते हैं और वो सीखने की कैपेबिलिटी ह्यूमंस की सबसे ज्यादा एज कंपेयर टू अदर्स. व्हाई? बिकॉज ह्यूमन ब्रेन साइज इज लॉन्गर एंड ह्यूमंस हैव अ लॉन्गर डिपेंडेंसी ऑन देयर पेरेंट्स until they become a fully grown of human beings. क्योंकि उनका सर्वाइवल इस पे डिपेंडेंट है, तो उनको बहुत ज्यादा चीजें सीखनी पड़ती है, उसी से उनका सर्वाइवल है. ह्यूमन बींग्स चाहे शेर से कितना भी कमजोर हो, फिजिकली तो हम में क्या पावर है, हम कुत्ते से लड़ेंगे हार जाएंगे, चिंपैंजी से लड़ेंगे हार जाएंगे, शेर से लड़ेंगे हार जाएंगे. बट ह्यूमन बींग्स हैव ब्रेन, ह्यूमन बींग्स हैव क्रिएटेड कल्चर. Human beings would go with a gun and easily defeat even a tiger or a lion. Why? Because human beings created these things. This was not a capability that was provided to us by God. This was not something that was inherently biological in us. It is something that we have created. No other animal has been able to do that thing. And what exactly are we going to learn is a result of the society in which we are going to be born. And that is why it is said that culture is a set of learned ideas and behaviors. Culture is a set of learned ideas and behaviors. जिस भी तरह से हम बिहेव करते हैं, actually all of these are what? Cultural ideas. And every society's culture is different. One thing is that human beings have culture as compared to animals. That is one way of understanding it. And what kind of culture do the human beings have? Different societies have different kind of cultures. That is something that we need to understand. And as such, if you look at the basic characteristics of the culture, you would be able to appreciate that. Of course, this needs to be dealt with in more detail in the classes. First is culture is made up of learned behaviors, like I told you. Most of the human culture is learned. It gets accumulated over a period of time. It is a result of our learning. It is not something that is inherent into us. Right? For example, why do the Indian children pay respect to their parents by either touching their feet or by folding their hands? Cultural learning. It is not biological. American children would not give respect to their parents by just touching their feet. They would simply go and shake their hands. Cultural. Right? Or why are you vegetarian or why are you non-vegetarian? Just ask yourself this question and you would get an answer that maybe I am a vegetarian person because I was born in a culture which was vegetarian. Or I was born in a culture which was non-vegetarian. And I learned this thing through my family or any other institution of the society. And I'm not saying all of the individuals are actually going to behave in the same way only. Because if it is a result of learning, human beings can also unlearn, they can also change their behaviors. Human beings can learn, at the same time they can do what? They can also unlearn things, they can also change their behaviors. This is something that is different about the human beings. Right? Secondly, if you see the cultures, another characteristic, it is what? It is the way through which we symbolize and organize the world around ourselves. I already told you, we have language through which we have actually given meanings and symbols to everything around ourselves. This is the pen, this is the board, this is the language that I'm writing on the board, this is the phone, this is the water bottle, so many things. I'm tensed, I'm happy, I'm depressed, I love, I'm a friend of someone, I'm a son of someone, I'm a daughter of someone, I'm a husband to someone, someone is wife to some man. All of these are what? Symbols. Right or wrong? Do the animals have something called as husband and wife? No, they have a male and a female. Right? Meaning we have symbolized the world around ourselves. And like Leslie White said, human beings are the only species on this planet which can differentiate between water and holy water. Symbolism. Why something becomes sacred is a symbol that we have provided to it. It is a symbolism that we have created around this. Culture is a set of shared system of norms and values. Meaning, every society has certain shared norms. Why do North Indians believe that cow is a sacred animal? It is a shared norm. Everybody shares this idea. And that is why if anybody wants to break that norm, they will face. retaliation from the society. Caste in India is a shared norm. If you break the caste rules to marry outside the caste, definitely it will not be an easy thing for you to do. इंटरकास्ट शादी आप करना चाहते हो, लेकिन करना इतना आसान है नहीं. क्यों? क्योंकि सोसाइटी का शेयर्ड नॉर्म है कि कास्ट के अंदर शादी करो. सोसाइटी का शेयर्ड नॉर्म क्या है कि शादी अपनी जाति में करो, जाति से बाहर शादी नहीं करनी है आपको. इंटरकास्ट शादी करते ही सोसाइटी आपके ऊपर अटैक करने लगती है. कल्चर इज द वे थ्रू विच ह्यूमंस अडैप्ट टू द वर्ल्ड. यस, वी सॉ दैट chimpanzee will not be able to survive in the Arctic on his own. But humans, on the other hand, they are going to take their culture with them. जैकेट लेके जाएगा, मकान बनाएगा, आग लगाएगा, खाना पकाएगा और खा लेगा. मकान के अंदर रह लेगा, हीटर लगा लेगा और जो कुछ करना है वो सब कुछ क्रिएट कर लेगा अपने आसपास. चिंपैंजी कर ही नहीं सकता बेचारा. तो ह्यूमन बीइंग्स कैन डू दिस थिंग. Human beings are going to adapt to those circumstances by creating this culture. And that is why human beings are even going to the space, creating an artificial environment there. Today, if you see the human beings, they are living in what? The whole of the things that they have created around themselves. हम लोग करते तो हैं कि नेचर में जाकर रहना, नेचर में जाकर रहना, but नेचर में जाकर रहना is not easy for you. Because this has been a blessing of being a man, or the blessing of being a human being, that you have created such elaborate culture around yourself. Just try to spend one day in the dense Amazon forest without these facilities and you will realize yourself. एक पहली बार जो जीवन में ट्रैकिंग पे जाएगा उसको समझ में आ जाएगा क्या करना जीवन में. सांस फूलने लग जाएगी, गर्मी लगेगी, सोने की जगह नहीं मिलेगी, थक जाएगा बहुत ज़्यादा. तो इंसान ने इतना सारा कल्चर बनाया ताकि वो अडेप्ट कर सके सर्कमस्टेंसेस से. यहां से इंसान सोचे कि आज मैं अमेरिका जाता हूं पैदल, पहुंचेगा पता नहीं कितने साल बाद. Without our culture, we are nothing. We have created all of these things. Culture is not necessarily the traditional way in which you have been understanding culture. जैसा हमने सुना होगा कि हमारा कल्चर खतरे में है, वो भी एक कल्चर का पार्ट है, right? So broadly, the anthropology revolves around the idea of culture only. Very, very important thing. It is something that is very interesting aspect of anthropology. And these four characteristics of the culture actually help us in appreciating some things about the culture. And I've already told you how biology has shaped the culture. होता है. In fact, human culture has also shaped its biology. इंसान के कल्चर ने भी उसकी बायोलॉजी को शेप किया. जैसे if you see humans, you might have seen so many people having braces on their tooth. दांतों के ऊपर वो ब्रेसेस लगाते हैं क्योंकि उनके दांत टेढ़े मेढ़े हो जाते हैं. इस फिनोमेना को हम बोलते हैं malocclusion. You would never find this malocclusion as a phenomenon in any other animal. गाय के दांत वैसे ही होते हैं सबके, कुत्तों के दांत सबके वैसे ही होते हैं, कभी भी दांत टेढ़े मेढ़े नहीं होते, खाली इंसान के दांत टेढ़े मेढ़े होने लग गए. Why did this happen? Because human beings do not simply rely on whatever is available in the nature. They pick up those things from the nature and they modify them, they process them and they eat them. जैसे हम आग लगा के खाने को पकाते हैं, this is culture. No other animal is doing this thing, only humans are doing this thing. हम खाने को प्रोसेस करते हैं, हम उसको सॉफ्टर बनाते हैं और फिर हम खाते हैं. Because of eating softer foods, our jaws have become weaker. The muscle mass in the jaws have been lost. Simply go and open up a picture of a chimpanzee and you will find that chimpanzees have such stronger jaws because they have to eat raw food. Human beings have lost the capability to jaw, but their brain size has increased. So with this softer food that they have been eating, with the decrease in the jaw size and the soft jaw muscles, you see what? Crowding of the teeth. And that is why you need braces to again put them into proper fashion. Yes? Only human beings are those species which can have cavities in their tooth. कुत्ते के दांत खराब नहीं होते कभी, चिंपैंजी के दांत खराब नहीं होते, गाय के दांत खराब नहीं होते बिना वो ब्रश करे भी. Why is it so? Because human beings developed agriculture 10,000 years ago. That was also human culture. That was also human culture that we created ourselves for getting our foods. But unfortunately in agriculture we only grew few kinds of crops. We grew them 10,000 years ago, we are even eating them today. Wheat, rice, barley. 10,000 साल से हम चावल खा रहे हैं, 10,000 साल से हम रोटी खा रहे हैं या गेहूं खा रहे हैं. But the problem is they are rich in carbohydrates. Human beings' diet has transformed from the hunter-gatherer's diet to a carbohydrate-rich diet. What did carbohydrate-rich diet do? Carbohydrate-rich diet actually goes into your mouth. The remaining carbohydrate that is stuck in your teeth is disintegrated by the bacteria and produces acids. What do these acids do? They dissolve your tooth. They dissolve the carbonate, the calcium which is present in your tooth. They dissolve the enamel, and because of which you have cavities. इसलिए दांत में खड्डे पड़ते हैं. Getting the point? So anthropology then would be basically what? Anthropology is basically, if you look at this idea, if you want to understand this thing, I've already told you in the beginning that anthropology tries to study and wants to address a very fundamental thing about the human beings, that how we became the humans that we are, one, biologically, and two, social culturally, and it is, we want to understand how biology has influenced the beginning of culture and how culture has influenced the biology in time and space. In time and space, that is in past and in present. And that is why some people want to claim anthropology as the study of man and his works. Some people say that it is the nearest to the total study of man. Why? Because it studies biological, cultural, all aspects in time and space. No other discipline can do that thing. Economic aspects, how they originated, anthropology studies that. Political aspects, how they originated, anthropology studies that. Religion, how it originated, how it is being practiced today, anthropology studies that. Almost every aspect. That is why anthropology is termed as what? A holistic discipline. Some people want to claim that anthropology is a biocultural science. Yes, it is a biocultural science because it wants to understand what? The correlationship between the biology and culture and how culture influences the biology. Something very unique to anthropology. Something very, very clear with anthropology. It's a biocultural science. It is not any other discipline. Its main focus area is this. And that is why it is said what? It is the most humanistic in the sciences and most scientific in the humanities. Because it has a peculiar way of understanding this thing. So through this contextual analysis, we have been able to understand what are the fields of anthropology and why do we have those fields in anthropology. Now, if this thing interests you, if you have interest in understanding the world through this fashion, through this scientific knowledge, anthropology is the discipline for you. If this is something that interests you, anthropology is the discipline that you should choose. It is understanding the biological aspects and understanding cultural aspects. Some people come with this preconceived idea that anthropology would require some amount of biological understanding or a biological background. Let me assure you, the biology that you need here is of 10th level only, because we're only going to study that part of biology which will help us in understanding evolution. For example, we would study genetics. But genetics from what perspective? From perspective of how that genetics helps us in understanding the evolution of the man. How genetics helps us in understanding what? The evolution of the man. It has an application. And anybody who is choosing to prepare for UPSC is actually going to study genetics for the prelims examination itself. Archaeology, anyways, you would study it in history, in ancient history. But with anthropological understanding, it will be a far more broader understanding that you're going to have there. Right? Primatology, you might have seen some questions are being asked these years in prelims examination. Like one was the questions was related to orangutan, how they are creating rudimentary tools, how they are using sticks as tools. But anyways, it's not something that I want to clearly highlight here, but the point is this. Social cultural anthropology and its correlation in the paper 2 is going to be applicable to what? Society section in GS paper 1. Social justice, vulnerable sections like tribes, castes, OBCs, SCs, STs in paper 2. Right? And this cultural knowledge actually could be applied to any of the ethics paper as well as your essay paper. So broadly, this is how we want to understand this thing. But the only criteria that you should have is you should not come with any preconceived notion. You should always try to develop your interest in this discipline. There are ways of developing interest, but don't wait too much. Just go through certain basic texts. I'm going to tell you which basic texts you need to go through. And also talk about a bit about how to strategize for the examination. And by analyzing one of the topics, I'm going to tell you that what exactly is the nature of the question that is going to be asked in the examination. Right? We are going to do that analysis. So just try to develop your interest, just try to think in this direction in which we have discussed things in this particular discussion. Now, I'll take you to a topic of anthropology, which is very, very interesting, which is that if you want to understand marriage, marriage is basically what? Let's first look at the syllabus. If you look at the syllabus of the social cultural anthropology, I've already told you what? Culture forms the core of anthropology. And to understand the culture, there are theories. How we are going to study? First, we are going to understand the characteristics of the culture. Then we are going to study theories. On the basis of the theories, you will have understanding of the concept of culture in a broader fashion. Family, economic organizations, political organizations, and religion. This is broadly your social cultural anthropology. You're going to study and understand these facets in your social cultural anthropology. Culture as a concept, theories that explain the idea of culture, as well as what? As well as the institutions like marriage, family, kinship, economic organizations. Political organizations and religion. Anyways, let's take up an example of the topic of marriage. How exactly do we follow the idea of marriage in anthropology? Now, many of you might have some idea about the idea of marriage. But have you ever wondered that only humans have marriage? Secondly, there is no society on this planet Earth which does not have something called as marriage. Almost everybody has a marriage. Right? And marriage is not a very simple phenomena. Every society has their own rules of marriage. Just if you are born in an Indian society, the most fundamental rule of marriage would be you should marry within your caste. That is caste endogamy. So if you look at anthropology, how it deals with the topic of marriages, they want to simply see and address certain fundamental questions about the marriage. That why is marriage nearly universal in all the societies? There are only few societies which do not have an institution which could be termed as marriage. Whom you cannot marry, there are rules governing that. For example, the most fundamental rule of whom you cannot marry is by incest taboo. Clearly identified by the idea that you cannot marry your sister or your brother. It's a rule in the human societies, not necessarily followed in the animal societies. Right? Or, for that matter, you might see the rules of exogamy, endogamy. That is, they are going to define a group in which you got to marry, and they're going to define a group outside which you got to marry. Just say, if you are born in the Indian society, you got to follow Gotra exogamy, caste endogamy. So whom you cannot marry and whom you can marry is actually highlighted by these rules. Right? And not just this. How many should one individual marry? Should only one man and female should marry? Or more than one females could be married by a single man? कितनों से शादी करनी ये बात भी मैरिज बताएगी. कितने लोगों से शादी करनी ये भी कोई नॉर्मल बात नहीं है. हर सोसाइटी के अपने रूल्स हैं, हर सोसाइटी के अपने नॉर्म्स हैं. तो simply if you look at the fundamental rules governing the institution of marriage, is that you will find that there are certain rules like this. Certain rules which are called as the rules of endogamy and exogamy. Then there are preferential rules where you might find in certain societies people would want to marry their cousins There is a norm in that society. For example, among certain Muslim communities in the southern parts of India, people usually marry their cousins. What happens if one of the partners dies? Whom you are going to marry is divided by what? Levirate and sororate. In certain societies, there is marriage between uncle and niece. Mama and bhanje ke beech mein shaadi hoti hai. So you see all these things. Then number of partners, monogamous, polygynous. Monogamous, polygamous. Polygamous means if one man is marrying more than one female, it is polygyny. If one female is marrying more than one man, it is polyandry. Yes or no? So what we see here is that even the institution of marriage that we see here is a clearly defined idea in anthropology, and that is what makes it objective. Why? Because anthropology wants to understand the universal features of these cultural institutions. कि ओवरऑल क्या रूल्स हैं जो पूरे इंस्टीट्यूशन ऑफ मैरिज को गवर्न करते हैं, उन सारे रूल्स को क्लासिफाई करेगा. तो ये सारे रूल्स हमने देखे क्लासिफिकेशन के, और कैसे हर एक सोसाइटी में अलग अलग हैं, उनके एग्जाम्पल्स एंड केस स्टडीज. So social cultural anthropology, you might have heard this idea that we got to use case studies, we got to use the definitions of the anthropologists. Actually, this is where we are going to use this. How do we define the institution of marriage? There is a thinker called as Kathleen Gough. How do we define the concept of culture? We see it through a definition provided by E.B. Tyler, first and foremost anthropologist, in his work Primitive Culture in 1871. We go through that definition. So there are these certain standard things in anthropology that we got to follow as a routine while we are going to study these topics. Case studies for all of these things. Which societies have polyandry? Which tribes have polyandry? Which tribes have polygyny? Right? So on and so forth. All these rules we are going to discuss there. At the same time, we will see a reflection of this in our paper 2 also. The thing that you have heard about anthropology, that it is a small subject, is because of your paper 2. Why? Because paper 2 has very limited topics as compared to paper 1. Paper 1 is as elaborate and big as any other optional subject that UPSC offers. But paper 2 relatively is small because paper 2 only has these topics. First, the prehistoric and proto-historic cultures of India. 2, the traditional Indian social system. 3, caste system. 4th, village studies. 5th, tribal anthropology. And contribution of the Indian anthropologists. These are the only topics which are there in your paper 2, and that is what makes paper 2 relatively manageable and smaller as compared to paper 1. Paper 2 relatively smaller and manageable as compared to what? The paper 1. That is why it becomes what? A subject that is shorter than the other subjects. Not because the paper 1 is small. Paper 1 is as big as any other subject. But paper 2 relatively is smaller as compared to the other subjects. Why? Because if you see the prehistoric cultures, this is nothing but archaeology. And even this part of archaeology is overlapping with what? The archaeology that is there in paper 1. Traditional Indian social systems, basically we study the basic values that are part of the Indian civilization. How Hinduism has provided us with various fundamental values. For example, you are going to study about Purusharth, like dharma, arth, kam and moksha, varnashram, rina, karma, rebirth, all of these things, which we also study a bit in history. So that part is going to help you in Indian society's understanding, the civilizational basis of the Indian society, everything we are going to study here. And caste system is an intriguing part of the Indian society. Caste and tribe are 2 very important features of the Indian society, and they are studied as core of the paper 2. And to understand the caste system in detail, we have something called as village society, because Indian society's peculiar feature is that it has traditionally been a rural society. It has traditionally been what? An agricultural society. So if it has been a traditionally rural society, village studies are basically core of it. तो इंडियन पेपर के अंदर 3 ही चीजें सबसे इंपॉर्टेंट. आर्कियोलॉजी तो पेपर 1 के साथ ओवरलैपिंग हो गई. Archaeology is overlapping with the paper 1. Traditional Indian social system is something that we are already aware of, just we need to give it some anthropological perspective. Caste is something that we got to study in detail in paper 2 because it is a peculiar feature of Indian society. Tribal anthropology is something that we study in bit detail, but the good thing is you only got to deal with these topics. All other parts are subparts of these topics. Broadly, the syllabus is comprised of only these 6 topics. And no other discipline has such a shorter syllabus of paper 2. That is why anthropology becomes a bit shorter as compared to the other disciplines. Do you get it? Yes or no? I think I've given you a broader overview of this, that how exactly do we need to prepare? How exactly the syllabus has been defined? How exactly are we going to go through these ideas? If you have got any better understanding of this, if you understood everything that we discussed here, so you can just mention it in the chat box in the comment section. Right? I appreciate you writing some comments in the chat box. Or maybe we are going to meet in the classes further. So just let me know what exactly did you get to know, how exactly was your understanding. Did you develop some interest in the discipline of anthropology? You can just mention it there. Anyways, but before concluding this session, we have not talked about how exactly do we need to study it from UPSC perspective. All I have done is I have given you a glimpse of what anthropology is all about. मैंने सिर्फ ये समझाया कि एंथ्रोपोलॉजी क्या है, कैसे इसका सिलेबस है, क्या क्या हम इसमें पढ़ते हैं. इसी बात पे हमने जनरली फोकस किया है. Right? We have focused on this particular aspect. One last part and one simple thing that we need to understand is how exactly should we prepare. And I'll tell you, there is a golden rule of preparation for any optional, not just anthropology. See, I showed you the pictures of some of the toppers in the beginning. This person that you see here is Abhishek Davachia. When he came to me after the prelims examination, he was confused that will I be able to crack this examination? He actually cleared his prelims in the first attempt. And when he cleared his prelims in the first attempt, he did not have any idea that how to prepare the optional subject, and his optional was not anthropology. I'm telling you this thing. Why optional subject does not matter, your way of preparation actually matters a lot also. That is also an important fact. So he had studied his optional subject to some extent. He had some idea in the in paper 1 related to that. He had studied a bit about it before the prelims. So he came to me and he asked me, sir, how exactly do I need to prepare in the coming 2.5 months or 3 months that I have for the mains examination? He had just gone through the syllabus, he had studied certain sections, he had gone through the notes of those parts of the syllabus, but he did not have an idea that how exactly should I structure my preparation here, and that actually bothered him a lot. So I just simply, because I was also teaching, and I gave him a formula that what you do is, you write the previous year questions, seeing into your notes, or books, or internet as a source, and prepare model answers on those PYQs, or on important themes of the PYQs, the themes which are repeated. Do this and apply that in the test series. Do this part and apply that in what? The test series. Right? And what will it do? It will make your exam preparation more methodical, more exam oriented. Largely, what I understand is the preparation of UPSC involves 3 steps for optional subject. It is a golden rule that everybody should understand. First part is, of course, knowledge. Without knowledge, you cannot master your optional subject. People who want to jump directly onto Akshat Jain, Vivek Bhasme, or they want to jump directly onto the notes of the toppers should be wary of this idea. Why? Because those notes were prepared by them through rigorous hard work that they did at that point of time. It was based on their understanding. It was useful for them, not for you. Right? First is knowledge, conceptual understanding, conceptual clarity. For that, we will deal with this in classes. I'll give you notes, dictate them, give you some handouts. Plus, I'll recommend you to go through certain books. I'll recommend you to go through certain books that you got to go. Because if you do not go through those books, eventually your knowledge system will be shallow. Today, there is a trend in civil services preparation that we should directly jump onto the short notes, should not go through the books, but let me alert you that without going through those books, it will be very difficult to develop a conceptual understanding. Secondly, the next step that is important part of your preparation is you got to write those PYQs, seeing into these notes, these books that you have read, and prepare the model answers. Because when you do this exercise, actually you will have to think a lot. You will have to think a lot about those concepts, and unless you have clarity, you will never be able to write those model answers. And what you actually get in the market in the form of toppers notes or the PYQ books that are written, actually they are the crux of their effort that they made in understanding and then preparing those model answers on the PYQs and the PYQ themes. That was the most fundamental thing that they did. And if you are able to repeat this exercise, if you are able to do this thing and apply that in the test series, this is where you complete the loop from knowledge to making your preparation more exam oriented to eventually improving your scores. Because when you do this step, actually you improve your answer writing. And this is largely a thing that students have been missing for a longer period of time. This is basically the problem that many of the students are skipping. They would just study and simply jump to the test series, score less marks, and then get discouraged. We got to avoid this thing. It's a clear-cut no. And when Abhishek Davacha followed this strategy, of writing the PYQs model answers, because when you're going to write an answer, it is going to take either half an hour or 1 hour when you're seeing into the notes and writing. And that would require a lot of effort. By doing this thing and applying that in test series and then repeating this again and again in those 2.5 months, he was able to get 171 marks in paper 1 in his optional subject. Because the method never fails. Method is the same for everyone. So if we talk about anthropology, we are going to focus on following the same rule here. First, thorough understanding. How? Through the classes, through the notes that I dictate, through the notes and handouts that I give, also the books that I recommend. 2, making everything exam oriented in the form of the notes. 3, writing the PYQs and anticipated questions, and then reproducing that in a time-bound fashion. But don't jump onto this step directly. Students start talking about answer writing from the first class itself. You cannot write answers unless you have an understanding. Your capability of writing good answers is directly proportional to how good you have understood that topic. So first step of understanding that topic is, of course, the classes. Second step is the books that you're going to read. Third step is your understanding is actually going to become concrete. And what is always going to belong with you, it is always going to stay with you, is this step when you write those PYQs. And invest your time in preparing model answers for that. टॉपर्स के जितने आपको नोट्स मिलते हैं एंथ्रोपोलॉजी के, वो सब उसी का रिफ्लेक्शन है. उन्होंने ये पूरा एफर्ट मारने के बाद में वो पूरे नोट्स बनाए हैं. हम लोग डायरेक्टली उस पर जंप करके फायदा उठाना चाहते हैं. डज नॉट वर्क दैट वे. Everyone has to go through the same process. Believe in the process and you will have the result. Got the point? So just a few things. Why should we focus on anthropology? I've already told you, 1, the objective and conceptual nature, because it has clearly developed how we got to understand the biological aspects of the man, how we got to understand the cultural aspects of the man. Secondly, questions are pretty straightforward, although now we are getting some analytical questions, but you will be able to address those questions only when you understand those things properly. And I keep emphasizing understanding knowledge and writing the PYQs, and writing PYQs is actually a Herculean task. It is not easy. Because for you to be able to prepare those 500 questions, it is going to be a really difficult job. Even if I give you the solutions of those 500 questions, it is not going to make any sense, because that's not learning. Most of us have forgotten the learning part in the preparation, and that is why most of us are struggling. This has been a thing in this year's prelims, and this is something that is happening in the mains also, in the students. Mains also with the students. Got the point? Plus, it has standard answer writing technique. involves diagrams. Everywhere there are going to be diagrams. Don't see diagrams as a handicap. Actually, you will, anyways, everybody's saying that you got to make diagrams, and here you already have standard diagrams to be made in the exam. And that can make your expression in the examination more effective. आपके expression को और effective बना देगा वो exam में. So diagram making is actually an opportunity for us to express better in the examination, rather than a handicap on us. Right? And lastly, I always keep telling this thing, that focus on that optional subject which generates interest. I have attempted to generate some curiosity about anthropology in this session. Through everything that I've discussed in the last 2.5 hours or 2 hours, is to generate some amount of curiosity. Right? Talking about the objective nature of this subject, I'd like to go through a few previous year questions. Although you might not be aware of these previous year questions, but if you look at the repetition, same questions is being asked in different formats. Erect posture, I talked about bipedalism, if you remember. What exactly are the losses and the gains of the bipedalism? I told you, bipedalism led to freeing of the forelimbs, opposability of the thumb, tool making, increase in brain size. These were the gains. There were certain costs also associated with bipedalism, but we talked about what? Bipedalism and erect posture, what exactly were the consequences of that? Then see another question, evolutionary significance of bipedalism and erect posture, again the same question. Third question, explain the skeletal changes due to erect posture and bipedalism in the human evolution. What we get to know is that these are fixed themes, and good thing is in physical anthropology, much of the syllabus remains the same, nothing changes. Homo erectus पढ़ लिया एक बार, Homo erectus का phylogenetic status पढ़ लिया, उसके around debate पढ़ ली, तो उसमें कुछ नया ऐड नहीं करना है. Unless a new discovery is made, you do not have to add anything there. Right? Or social cultural anthropology में, if you have to go through this, there are standard case studies. It is not that you are always going to fetch those case studies from the current affairs. Only few examples you can fetch from the current affairs, but most of them are what? Standard case studies that you need to use. For example, universal definition of the marriage. Exceptions to the definition of the marriage have been provided by Kathleen Guff by her study in the Nair community of Kerala. Or the Na community of Yunnan of China. Standard है, आपको लिखना है वहाँ पे. है? Trobriand Islanders studied by Malinowski is a standard case study. Iroku studied by L.H. Morgan is a standard case study. So our focus has to be on those standard ethnographic studies conducted by the anthropologists, and the most fundamental thing would be that how we approach the theories part. Theories are going to form the fundamentals, because it is an optional subject, it is not a GS subject. If you write an answer like GS, you will not get marks. Your answer need to look like an anthropological answer. Right? And there is a particular way of understanding the topics in anthropology. If you do not do that thing, you cannot score good marks in anthropology. That's a fact. So I told you and gave you a glimpse of how the questions are going to be asked. For example, there is another theme which is called as cultural relativism. Human rights and cultural relativism, short notes on cultural relativism, why the concept of cultural relativism is dear to anthropologists. And if we talk about the books that we got to study, I'm not giving you an elaborate list of the books that you need to follow right now, but I'm just giving you a glimpse of the basic level books or the beginner level books that you need to focus upon. Anybody who wants to generate the interest in anthropology should go through the Kerala State SCRT books of class 11th and 12th, because we do not have NCRTs in anthropology. For other disciplines, we have NCRTs. For anthropology, unfortunately, we do not have NCRTs. But the Kerala State SCRT books are very well written, very simply written, and they are going to help you in developing some very basic understanding of anthropology as a discipline. And once you go through this, do not try to get into the technicals and the details. Just try to have an overview. Second standard textbook is Amber and Amber, but initially it might be a bit difficult for you to comprehend. So you can go through a few chapters initially, the first parts, what anthropology is, and then we are going to cover this Amber and Amber along with our classes, both for physical and social cultural anthropology. Plus there are certain textbooks that I'm going to give you readings in the class. Either I'm going to share PDFs of some section of that book or those books. You got to read those books. बिना पढ़े किताब के समझ में नहीं आता है. बिना पढ़े किताब के you cannot never write things with conviction. Reading book is first and foremost and very, very important step in preparation of the optional subject. Anybody who says that don't read books is actually trying to fool you. Because UPSC eventually is an exam of knowledge and academics. It is not a superficial exam. And we are seeing everywhere shortcuts being deployed, but shortcuts do not work. Shortcuts work only for those people who have already gained that knowledge. They're not going to work for a beginner, right? And beginners usually see the toppers' talks, they simply see certain teachers, and they try to think that value addition is the most important part. What is value addition? Value addition is addition to the already existing knowledge. You have just begun, you should not focus upon value addition. It is something that we will focus upon later. Or start answer writing. Start answer writing when you have understood something. Can you write an answer on the French Revolution today without even knowing what French Revolution is? Can you write an answer on American Revolution without knowing what the American Revolution is? Can you write an answer on plate tectonics without knowing what plate tectonics is? Or can you write an answer on fundamental rights without knowing what fundamental rights is? So why are people saying that there are techniques of writing the answers? They only become applicable once you have developed the knowledge and understanding. Clear-cut thing. If anybody says otherwise, they are fooling you. Don't get fooled with this. Right? And this misleading idea has actually led to n number of problems for the students. Everybody thinks that UPSC is a short exam. I'm going to crack it in short period of time. Of course, you can crack it in a limited period of time, not necessarily short period of time. उतना तो करना ही पड़ेगा जितना इस एग्जाम के रिक्वायरमेंट है, और इस एग्जाम का रिक्वायरमेंट है इतना आसान ही होता तो इतना सारा सिलेबस थोड़ी देता यूपीएससी, चाहे ऑप्शनल हो चाहे जीएस हो, है? एंड वो ऐसा सिलेबस है जो किसी ने पहले नहीं पढ़ा स्कूल में पूरी तरीके से, कॉलेज में नहीं पढ़ा है. किसी का इकोनॉमिक्स रहा होगा अगर ग्रेजुएशन में तो उसने हिस्ट्री नहीं पढ़ा होगा, किसी का हिस्ट्री रहा होगा तो उसने साइंस नहीं पढ़ा होगा, किसी का साइंस होगा तो उसने एथिक्स नहीं पढ़ा होगा. तो सब चीज हमें यहां आके सीखनी है, राइट? कम विथ एन ओपन माइंड, कम विथ अ क्यूरियोसिटी, कम विथ अ attitude of learning. If you can do that thing, it is eventually going to help you in this examination. If you're not ready to do this thing, if you are wanting to cut corners, if you are wanting for shortcuts, this is not the exam for you. And of course, anthropology is also not the optional for you if you're not ready to do this thing. Okay, anyways, I think I have made my points clear here. Before ending the session, I would like to share that you can contact me with this on Instagram or on Telegram. Telegram it is anthropologically, right? Or you can contact me here. Just drop me a message only for the sake of query, nothing else. If you want to understand anything beyond this thing. Right, you can contact me here, just drop me a message. So maybe we will get in touch, or if you have any further queries, we can of course discuss this thing. Or you can visit the center here at the VisionIAS, Karol Bagh. We will be able to contact and discuss things here. Right? I hope you have understood this thing. If you have any queries, please put it there in the comment box. ठीक है? Fair enough. We'll wind it up from here and meet on 15th of July, which is the date for the commencement of the anthropology's classes. 15 July ko we are going to start. Before that, try to go through at least the Kerala State SCRT's book. Just try to know what exactly is there, and whatever we have discussed, just try to think about those ideas. Whatever we have discussed in the discussion that we have had till now. It's 2 to 4:30, I guess. Both online and offline it is available. So we can do in both the formats. Okay, let's wind it up.
Most aspirants treat optional as a subject. Toppers treat it as an opportunity. An opportunity to gain an edge, boost their main score and strengthen their final rank. The question is simple: simultaneous preparation today or overwhelming pressure later on? Because optional preparation cannot be built overnight after prelims. It requires time, depth, practice, refinement. Start early, prepare smart, stay ahead. Join the VisionIAS Optional Classroom Program 2027 and turn your optional into your strongest scoring advantage. With comprehensive syllabus coverage, expert faculty guidance, subject-specific answer writing support, personalized mentorship, regular tests and performance assessment. Starting 1st July, batches are available for Anthropology, Geography, History, Philosophy, Physics, PSIR, Public Administration, Sociology. Register now and secure your seat.
Time is of the essence, and your UPSC preparation demands that you use it wisely. Every day you invest today shapes the knowledge you build, the confidence you gain, and the progress you make tomorrow. That's why your preparation deserves more than just effort. It deserves a structured plan. Introducing the VisionIAS Delhi GS Foundation Course 2027. A comprehensive program designed to help you build strong fundamentals, stay consistent, and prepare systematically for every stage of the civil services examination. Prepare comprehensively with general studies for prelims and mains, dedicated CSAT preparation for prelims, specialized essay preparation for mains, integrated current affairs, regular tests with detailed performance analysis, continuous mentorship, and expert guidance. When your preparation is guided by a clear roadmap, every class adds value, every test measures progress, and every day moves you closer to your goal.